Very excited about this. It's time for the big story. And are the West right to back Israel in their response to the terror attacks of October the 7th? Is Israel's war our war? To answer this and to tackle some of the other massive issues facing the free world at the moment, I'm delighted to welcome the hugely popular US political commentator, best-selling author and star of The Michael Knowles Show on the fast-growing news website The Daily Wire, Michael Knowles. Michael, welcome to GB News.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's lovely to have you here. Not as posh and smart as the studios of The Daily Wire, but we're working on it.
You're much more financially responsible than we are. You know, you keep it stripped down and you get the most efficient way to get the news out there.
Correct. All the money goes on my wardrobe. Now, let's talk about the dreadful situation in the Middle East. Is Israel's war our war?
It is not literally our war in that we all acknowledge different nations have different interests. However, nations also have allies, and nations also, in great conflicts, have to pick a side. I was with a British priest friend of mine, and he said, look, you might have some criticisms of the policies of the State of Israel, but it doesn't take very much to realize that we ought not to be on the side of the baby beheaders. And I once thought that was a sensible position, but now apparently it's controversial.
Most definitely. The left in this country, the woke left and the hard left, the progressives, have definitely got behind the Palestinian cause, which, of course, you know, one can be sympathetic to the plight of Palestinians in Gaza, but with people on the streets sort of cheering what happened on October the 7th hours later, that's pretty clearly taking sides, isn't it?
Oh, of course. And I think if anyone on the right in the UK or America is confused about which side to be on here, just take a note of who's lining up on the pro-Palestinian side. In the States, we have a notorious group called the Squad, and that is AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, far-left members of Congress who are avowedly I could say pro-Hamas, in fact, given the zeal of their support.
By implication?
By implication, certainly. Rashida Tlaib has a handful of flags outside of her office. The Palestine flag, the state flag, the city flag, and the LGBT rainbow flag. No American flag to be found. And so the argument for the Palestine liberation movement, the from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, get rid of the state of Israel. The argument is the same argument that the radical left makes against the United States and against the UK, that we are colonizers, that we are oppressors.
Bit of white supremacy thrown in there.
White supremacists, it's the same thing.
Even though Israel is majority ethnic, but that doesn't fit the narrative, does it?
Exactly. And this is why immediately after that terror attack, Black Lives Matter posted a shot on their social media pages, not only of support for the Palestine flag, of a Hamas paratrooper saying, we stand with Palestine, because the same argument that's being used against Israel is being used against us as well.
Most definitely, of course, the person that paraglided into Israel on the 7th of October, murdered upwards of 260 people at a peace music festival, was certainly involved in that attack. We know the expression go woke, go broke. We've seen a progressive left takeover of our public institutions, corporations, much of the media, academia, showbiz. Has woke won?
Yes, but nothing's forever in politics. They won, but despair is a sin, and where there's life, there's hope. And we've seen a really wonderful glimmer of hope in the United States with regard to the corporations, and that would be in the boycott of a company that I refer to as Anheuser-Busch. This would be AB InBev. They sponsored a prominent transgender activist, and their sales tanked.
And of course they make Budweiser, and the particular product was Bud Light.
Bud Light, which was the most popular beer in the country. It is now, you can't give it away. They actually did try to give it away to wholesalers and retailers. Nobody wants it anymore. The thing has completely tanked, and we just had a report out, it remains tanked. So even as AB InBev's worldwide revenues increased by about 5% over the period July through September, sales in the United States dropped 13.5%. And it's because people are not going back to this. And the other thing that this tells us is counter to what some of the squishy conservative types would say. The ones who
we call them the wets in this country.
Yeah, I'll have to bring that back to America. All they say is just focus on cutting taxes, perhaps, and leave the so-called social issues alone. What we have learned through this unbelievably enduring boycott that's gone on from April until today with no end in sight is that this issue of the difference between men and women, of indoctrination in radical gender ideology, this is a winner for conservatives. It gave conservatives a blue commonwealth in the state of Virginia in America. It gave Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, popularity there. And it's a winner because it turns out that social issues are rather important in society.
Most definitely. I mean, people talk about how wokeism doesn't affect them, it's abstract. Well, a hurricane doesn't affect you until it reaches your house.
Right.
And I think that's what's happening with woke stuff, because now perhaps your female partner goes shopping and she's got to share a changing room with a biological male, and she feels afraid and she leaves and she says, I'm not going back to that shop. That's the reality of this stuff. You actually made a fascinating documentary, one of your programs, a special, about somebody that you called or was described as a trans widow. What is that?
A trans widow is a woman whose husband has fallen into this ideology and abandons the family to pursue what is effectively a sexual fetish in a lot of cases. This is something that one is not permitted to talk about. But these are the real victims, the wives and the children who have been left behind. And the numbers are skyrocketing. You know, the transgender identification has gone through the roof. Among Zoomers, Gen Z, something like 1 in 5 Zoomers identify as LGBT+. So either there's something in the water, or this is a social contagion. And there is good research that shows that a lot of it has been driven not only by social normalization, but also by ubiquitous online pornography and all sorts of other social pathologies. And so it's easy for the licentious campaigners to say, you do you, let people do what they want, let your freak flag fly. But there are legitimate victims, not the least of whom are wives and children.
Well, that's right. The government, the state, educators have a duty of care, as do families, on children and young people growing up. They're currently being let down because there will be, won't there, in years to come, a generation of very angry and probably physically unwell detransitioners.
Yes.
People who had operations, got puberty blockers to change gender, then became adults and regretted their decision deeply.
It's already happening. So you're starting now in the States to see the first lawsuits of heartbreaking stories. We've talked to a number of them, of women, especially young women, but young men too, who were put on these body-destroying hormones and puberty-suppressing drugs. It gives them things like osteoporosis, lifelong ailments. It could cut down their lifespan.
Infertility, of course.
And infertility, of course. And so now you're seeing lawsuits against not just doctors, but against whole medical associations, which have recklessly, irresponsibly endorsed these experimental so-called treatments. You know, we look back now with horror on procedures that would scramble up a woman's brains if she appeared to be hysterical. We look back on a lobotomy and say, this is ghastly. But 20, 30 years from now, what will we say about the doctors, the quacks, who rendered young children infertile based on a social and radical ideology?
Is there a flip side to that, which is to say that some people have gender dysphoria, they genuinely feel that they're in the wrong body and that they need medical support and public acceptance? Is that the counter-argument?
Well, it would be the counter-argument if one were to accept the premise of the left. What the left believes is that lies are comforting, they're strengthening, and the truth is very evil and oppressive. But I don't believe that. I believe that the truth will set you free. Called me old-fashioned. And so I got in trouble at the Conservative Political Action Conference.
Which is what you do brilliantly, by the way, getting in trouble.
Thank you very much. It's my profession, I think.
Correct.
I made the point at CPAC, which was that for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey to this confusion, this ideology, the radical gender ideology must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole ideology, because it harms everyone involved. There was a large study out of your country, by the way, the largest data set ever looked at on the effects of the transgender procedures, surgical and hormonal. Do they actually work to alleviate feelings of dysphoria, suicidality, anxiety, depression? They don't. And in fact, not only do they not make any of those conditions better, but on one score, on anxiety, they make the conditions worse. So in medical science, we're supposed to follow the evidence. The evidence is clear here. These experimental witch doctor treatments do not work. We need to stop them immediately, especially on children.
Well, one particular clinic that specialised in these procedures has been shut down, which I think tells you everything you need to know, the Tavistock Centre. Listen, let's talk about Joe Biden. How is he still president? How did that happen? What's going on?
Joe Biden was elected, some say, because if Joe Biden were to have popular support, he would have popular support because he represents a return to normal. Joe Biden has been in American public life since 1972, when he was elected to the United States Senate. Very long time. And so what people when they voted for Joe Biden, what they wanted was a return to normal after the craziness, the wild presidency of Donald Trump.
What, you mean like growing economy and no wars?
That's quite abnormal, actually, because we have gotten a return to normal. We're on the brink of World War III. The economy is absolutely in shambles. The U.S. border is wide open. We have record millions and millions of illegal aliens crossing into the country every single year. So in every regard, things have gotten worse. And for some people, that might be a return to normal. But if that's normal, please give me some eccentricity.
Can Donald Trump save America? Will he be given the opportunity to do so?
Donald Trump, unless lightning struck him tomorrow, will be the Republican nominee for president. The polling against Joe Biden is very good, including in the swing states. What a lot of the election will come down to is whether or not election integrity measures can be put back into place after they were ripped out using the excuse of the coronavirus. In some cases that has happened. In some cases, certain cities with machine politicians and active political machines don't seem to have been corrected yet. So I think if the election were held tomorrow, fair and square, everybody just casts a vote, Trump would in fact win. The argument that he can't win a general election is preposterous. He already did it at least once in 2016. However, will the voting rules of COVID-19 prevent him from winning a fair and square election? That remains to be seen.
It's a great question. Many on the left, I'm sure you'll agree, because I think you've got plenty of viewers and listeners on the left who hate the woke stuff.
Yeah.
The old school liberals. People like legendary comedian Bill Maher, who doesn't appreciate 5-year-olds at school being told they're racist, or doesn't appreciate the idea that a new scientific fact is that you can change your sex, or that America's history is shameful. Mm-hmm. Many on the left reject this now, and many regular people watching this show as we speak. There are wins. You mentioned Bud Light. What about Disney? They've tied themselves in knots, haven't they, with various woke films that have bombed at the box office, but most notably Snow White. What's happened there? Tell my viewers and listeners what's going on with that film, because it's more or less been sort of shelved for a year.
I cannot criticize Disney. I won't do it because Disney is filling up the coffers of the Daily Wire. And so I beg them, please, more woke remakes of your classic beloved films. And more people are going to tune out from Disney, especially because Disney is children's content. So if you don't want your kids being indoctrinated in resentment and crazy ideologies, then you're going to have to turn somewhere else. Daily Wire has just released Bent Key. That's our children's app. We've announced that we're doing our own remake of Snow White, which is going to be all the beauty of the original and none of the woke craziness. And I think it is no coincidence that shortly after our announcement, Disney decided to give it another year to try to rework their
It's truly astonishing, isn't it? So it's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, a classic story, an age-old story. They cancelled the dwarves in the name of political correctness, which means putting dwarf actors out of work. Mm-hmm. You couldn't make it up.
You couldn't make it up. It seems always to just be opposite day. And so it's unfortunate because I thought maybe I could audition now for, if the dwarves are going to be average sized, maybe I could audition, but I think they might be going back.
You look a little sleepy to me.
I'm sleepy, certainly grouchy when I look at Disney's work. But in the meantime, I think Bob Iger got the message. And Bud Light sent that message loud and clear to corporate America.
Well, listen, go woke, go broke is true for Disney, but you go from strength to strength. The Daily Wire is a formidable network, available to everyone around the world, so do check it out. And The Michael Knowles Show, unmissable. The jewel in the crown of that place. Michael, thank you for joining us.
I've been saying it for years. Thank you so much
See you
for
right.
having me.
We'll catch up soon.